Hello everyone, my name is Charles Mwangi. I'll be taking you through principles of management. And today we are going to discuss planning as a function. And planning is one of the managerial functions that we have alongside other functions such as organizing function, directing function, controlling function, and staffing function. So we are going to define planning, and planning is defined as an activity, or it is determining ahead of time what is going to be done. It involves deciding in the present what is going to be done in the future. So some of the activities involved in planning include: one, objective scanning. So this one involves coming up with the objectives that the plan hopes to achieve. And then two is environmental analysis. So this one is scanning the environment, either external or internal environment, with regards to the plan that you're going to come up with. And then three, forecasting. So this one involves using the current data that we have to formulate projections on how this plan that you're going to come up with will be in line with the objectives you've set in place. Another one is decision making. So decision making entails making a choice. Among alternatives. So these are the activities that are involved in planning. So what are some of the characteristics of planning? Characteristics of planning entail: one, planning is goal-oriented. What we mean by this is that to formulate a plan, you take into account the goals you want to achieve as an organization. Also, planning is forward-looking. In that the plan that we come up with takes into account where we want to be in the future. And then also, planning is an intellectual process. So what we mean by this is that it involves coming up with ideas that are in line with the organizational goals and objectives. Also, it's a continuous process. Planning is a continuous process. What we mean by this is that the plan that we come up with will constantly change according to the prevailing circumstances, since the world is dynamic, and the plan has to stay relevant over the duration that it is to serve the organization. Then another one is that planning is integrative. What we mean by this is that the plan that we come up with has to integrate all the departments in the organization and to keep in mind the overall objectives of the organization. And then, so some of the importances of this planning, One is planning provides a sense of direction to the organizational members. So what we mean by this is that the employees get a sense of direction with the plan being placed on the organizational, let's say, chart. so that now the planning in itself will give them a sense of direction of the objectives that have been put in place. Also, it reduces uncertainties and risks. It reduces uncertainty and risks, uncertainty and risks. So what we mean by this is that the plan gives the employees a sense of security in that the environment under which they work in terms of risks is reduced. So it reduces uncertainty and risks in that they can follow a plan which is in line with the objectives and goals set in place. Also, it guides decision making. So what we mean by this is that the decisions that we make now will be in line with the objectives that we set up during the planning process. Also, it enhances efficiency of operations. So with a plan in mind, operations in an organization can run smoothly and help attain the objectives that have been set. Also facilitates coordination. And planning also is the primary function of management. It's the primary function of management. So in coming up with this plan, we can have certain constraints or barriers that we encounter. And some of these barriers to planning, constraints to effective planning, may include one, for instance, if the people we have tasked with coming up with this plan lack the proper skills, so a lack of planning skills. Also, there is that sense of uncertainty and risk that makes us regularly question our plans, also uncertainty and risks. And then there may be resistance from employees that the plan that we come up with, the employees who are in the organization may resist towards its implementation, resistance from employees. And another one is that there may be insufficient resources in terms of planning, that to come up with an adequate and effective plan, we need resources to be instituted in the organization. So there might be that insufficient resources that lead to us not having an effective plan to implement. And then another one is inferior and inadequate information. So what we mean by this is that the information required to come up with an adequate plan may be lacking in the organization, and hence the plan that we come up with will not be in line with what we are trying to achieve. So these are some of the barriers or constraints to effective planning. So some of the ways we can avoid this or overcome these barriers may include one, ways to overcome barriers to effective planning. So one of the ways to overcome this is if we involve the employees in coming up with this plan. So participation and involvement of employee participation and involvement. So if we involve the employees in coming up with this plan, we may actually come up with a plan that is not resisted by most employees, since they'll feel part of the plan that was formulated. Also, the plans themselves should be made flexible. in that they can accommodate changes in the circumstances that prevail. So the plans should be dynamic and change according to the prevailing circumstances. Also, we can also involve involvement of experts. This one, what we mean by this, it will help in curbing this inadequate information required to form an effective plan. So the usage of experts will help us have an idea or information regarding the plan that we're coming up with. And then another one, also communication, that in light of coming up with this plan, we communicate that there's a new plan to be instituted, which will now help in curbing the resistance from employees. And then another one is provision of adequate resources, including time. So what we mean by this is that the time needed to come up with a necessary or an effective plan should also be taken into account to ensure that the plan that we come up with serves the objectives that we set out. So in this planning function, we can have certain types of plans or different classifications of plans. So the plans are classified into two categories. One, they can either be based on scope. Classification may be based on scope. And in this classification based on scope, we have three types of plans: strategic and tactical plans, and operational plans. So this is one of the broad classifications of plans. Also, another classification is with regards to time or time frame. So classification based on time frame. So for this one, the plans that we come up with should take into account the time for them to be implemented. So we have long range plans, medium range or medium term plans, and then we have short-term plans. So for strategic plans, these ones are formulated at the top level management, which is the highest level of management in an organization. While for tactical, these ones are formulated by the tactical managers or the mid-level managers, and they are in line with the strategic business units in the organization. While for operational, these ones involve an activity or the day-to-day activities of the organization. So we are going to look at the difference in these three types of classification for strategic, tactical, and operational. And for this classification based on time frame, for long range plans, these ones are plans that go for 5 to 10 years, and medium term may go from 2 to 4 years. And for the short-term plans, these ones are generally 0 to 12 months. So classification based on time frame, this is the long range or the medium term or the short-term plans. Now, the difference between these three classification of strategic, operational, and tactical plans, we're going to look at them. And so there are different aspects of these three plans that differentiate them in terms of how they are formulated. So one of the aspects that differentiates these three plans is who come up with the plans of the strategic or operational or tactical. So strategic plans, operational operational or tactical plans, and operational. So on the basis of who come up with this plan, we have for strategic, it's the top level managers. They formulate this strategic plan, and it takes into account the business as a whole. So the scope of this this strategic plan is that it affects the business as a whole. And then for tactical, this one is formulated by the mid-level managers or the tactical managers, mid-level managers, or the tactical managers. And then this one is for the tactical managers. And this one is involved in the day-to-day activities. It is mostly a plan to make sure that an activity is done. So we have strategic, tactical, and operational. And then based on scope, now by scope we mean the strategic, the plans in terms of the area they affect. For strategic plans, this plan focuses on the entire business. So this one affects the entire business or the entire organization. And for tactical plans, these ones are for strategic business units, specific strategic business units within the organization. And this one, they have a narrow scope and are generally formulated covering a specific activities. Another basis of the difference of these three types of plans is the time frame. So for strategic plans, this one, they focus on the long term. And this is the period of 5 to 10 years. In that they take into account what the plan is aimed at achieving within this time frame. Also, for the tactical, it takes a moderate time frame or a medium moderate time frame of a period of 2 to 5 years. So in the next 2 to 5 years, the plan that we come up with, what is it going to achieve? And then another one for operational, this one is short-term in nature, and it covers a period of 0 to 12 months. And then another basis of the difference between these three types of plan is the environment in which they affect, so, or they focus on. So for this one, for strategic plan, it focuses on the external environment, And then for tactical plan, it focuses moderately on both the internal and external, moderate focus on both internal and external environment. And then this one is generally focused on the internal environment. So this is the area that this plan is aimed at focusing on. Like we have said, for strategic, it focuses on the external environment since it affects the whole business or the business as a whole. And then for tactical, it moderately focuses on both internal and external, in that for these strategic business units, the plan takes into account on how each unit can have a competitive advantage over another in the external environment. And then for operational, it focuses on an internal environment since it's mainly based on our specific activities. And then another basis of their differences is that in terms of complexity, and by complexity is how simple or how complex is the plan that we are formulating. Like for instance, the strategic plans that we come up with ideally will entail the business as a whole. So it is, in that regard, it is more complex. It is a complex plan since it takes into account the business as a whole. Since it takes into account the business as a whole. Business as a whole. And then for strategic, it is for tactical, it is relatively simpler as compared to a strategic plan, since this one just focuses on a strategic business unit. And then for operational, this one is a simple kind of plan since it measures on a specific activity. And then another basis of difference is that the resources that are employed in coming up with these plans. So for strategic plans, we have to use corporate resources or more resources compared to this other plan. Corporate resources are widely used since the plan that we come up with, it entails the business as a whole. And then for tactical plans, the plan focuses on how the already allocated resources will be utilized. So this one, for strategic, we use the corporate resources that are widely used in coming up with this plan, and it focuses on how these resources can be sourced or gotten. So how these resources can be sourced. And then for tactical, it focuses on how these resources that have been sourced will be allocated and utilized, allocation and utilization of these resources. And then for operational, the plan focuses on accomplishing the task within the budget. So this one focuses on accomplishing the task within the budget. So within the budget. So this is one of the main differences of these three plans in terms of resources, that for strategic plans, it focuses on how these resources will be sourced or gotten. And then for tactical plans, it focuses on how these resources that have been acquired will be allocated and utilized. And for operational plans, it focuses on accomplishing the task that we are saying here is a specific activity within the set budget. And then another basis is orientation. And for orientation, we mean what kind of area does it places focus on? For instance, for strategic plan, it focuses on effectiveness as opposed to efficiency. This is for strategic plans, effectiveness as opposed to efficiency. And then for tactical, it moderately focuses on effectiveness and efficiency. So how is the plan effective in these strategic business units is in line with tactical plans, moderately focused on effectiveness and efficiency. And for operational, it just focuses on efficiency. What we mean by this is that in doing this specific activity, the plan that we come up with in terms of an operational plan, it focuses on its efficiency in making sure that the task is accomplished and it is within the budget, focuses on efficiency. So this is the basis of the differences between these tactical, strategic, and operational plans that we formulate as a company. So another aspect we need to look at is in coming up with these plans, we formulate certain policies that the employees are to adhere to. So what are some of the importances of coming up with certain policies that will make sure that these plans are implemented? So importance of policies in an organization. Of policies in an organization. So first of all, these policies, they provide a sense of direction to the employees in that their behavior is well controlled and they are in line with the objectives of the organization. And then these policies also, they supply a convenient and authoritative reference. Supply convenient and authoritative reference. What we mean by this is authoritative reference. What we mean by this is that these policies act as a base of reference in case we ever want to deliberate on an issue in the organization. And then also they help in clarify ideas. They help in clarifying ideas and responsibility of managers and responsibilities of managers. They also ensure quick decision making in that if we know we have laid out policies, we are prone to come up with decisions even quicker. So quick or easier decision making. Since we have laid out policies governing the same issues. And then these policies also reduce uncertainty in the organization, uncertainty in the organization in that we know the policies that guide certain actions that are to be undertaken. And then, so in coming up with this plan, we have to follow a certain planning process that ensures we come up with an effective plan. So one is we identify the mission and vision, identification of the mission and vision of the organization, and vision of the organization. And by mission, we mean mission clearly states the purpose of the organization, while vision states where the company wants to be, And then the next step in coming up with an effective plan is you do an environmental scanning. What we mean by this is you analyze the existing environment, both internally and externally, so as to come up with an efficient plan that will serve the organization in terms of achieving the objectives that we have set. Also, now after analyzing this environment in terms of external and internal environments, we come up with objectives that we hope to achieve, objective setting from this plan that we'll formulate. Objective setting. So this one is coming up with goals or objectives that we hope to achieve with this plan. And then the next one is determining the planning premises. What we mean by this is the assumptions or presumptions we have to facilitate us coming up with a new plan or an effective plan, determining the planning premises. planning premises. And then another one is to identify alternative strategies to identify alternative strategies. So these alternative strategies, they help in trying to achieve this set objectives or the objectives that we came up with during this stage of objective setting. So these alternative strategies are just different ways in which you can achieve these objectives. And then from these alternative strategies, we evaluate them and see which one is the best suited to achieve our objectives. Evaluate alternative strategies. And then after we evaluate them on the basis of these objectives that we have set, we choose which is the best, or strategy to achieve this objective. And then evaluate alternative strategies and select the most suitable. So from these alternative strategies, we select the best one that will achieve the objectives we have set in place. Also, from this one, you can formulate derivative or contingent plans. Formulate derivative or contingent plan. What we mean by contingent plan, these are plans that are put in place in case the plan that we have come up with does not attain the set objectives. What other plans can we institute in trying to achieve this objective? So that is the contingent plan. And then the next part in the planning process, once you have come up with the contingent plan in line with the objectives that we are trying to set, you now seek cooperation from the employees or the workers, because to institute this plan, you will need their help. So secure cooperation. The next one is secure cooperation. And by securing cooperation, it may entail now engaging the employees or the workers in line with this plan. And then formulate programs for implementation. Lastly, formulate programs for implementation. So this is coming up with different programs on how this plan will be implemented. Formulate programs on implementation. So this one is rolling out the plan and how it will be set or be done in line with the objectives that you have set in place. So the next part we're going to look at is goal setting. So what goal setting is coming up with goals or certain objectives that we hope to achieve. And a goal is defined as what the organization hopes to achieve. What organization hopes to achieve. And so what are some of the characteristics of these goals? So these goals that we formulate have to bear certain characteristics for them to be effective in terms of implementation or in the organization. So we have an acronym for the characteristics of goals, which is stated to be SMART. And this is a short form for the goals should be specific in nature. They should also be measurable. They should also be achievable or attainable. They should also be realistic. They should also be time-bound. So what we mean by specific is that the goal should be clear. It should be clear or in terms of what it hopes to achieve. Also measurable, it should be quantifiable in nature, that we can quantify this goal. And then attainable, it can be achieved. It can be achieved. It's something that can be achieved, or it is something within our means. That with the current resources that we have, we can achieve these goals, also realistic. It should be in the realm of possibility. It should be something that is realistic. And then time bound, it should be time sensitive or timely, in that it should provide a clear frame of when it is to be achieved. So these are certain characteristics of goals that in formulating such goals, we have to bear in mind. And then, so we have different types of goals or different classifications of goals that we may come up with. So they are generally classified according to one, corporate goals, classification of goals. Now, these are the different classifications of goals that we have of goals. One, we have corporate goals, and then these are goals that relate to the company as a whole. So this one relates to the company as a whole, So these ones affect the company as a whole, and they involve decisions like which product are we going to make, or certain goals that we formulate in line with the company as a whole. And then another one is operational goals. So these ones are goals relating to a functional area of, this one relates to a functional area, This is different from the corporate goals, functional area. For instance, marketing. So this one is operational goals. They relate to a functional area. And then another type of goal is long-term and short-term, goals. So these ones, they are based on the time frame that they have been set. For instance, a long-term goal may take up to 5 to 10 years, and then short-term may be within a short period of time of, let's say, 0 to 12 months. And then economic and non-economic goals, So for economic goals, they relate to profitability. This one is profitability. This is mostly on profitability, while for non-economic goals is any other goal aside from profitability of the organization. And then another one is primary and secondary goals. So for primary goals, these are the basic goals which an organization hopes to achieve, and the secondary goals are those goals that support the primary goals. So these ones, they are the basic goals that an organization hopes to achieve, and this one, they support primary goals. So these are the different classifications of goals that we have in an organization. And we have certain importances of having these goals in an organization. So what are some of the importance of goals in an organization? So one of the importance of having goals in an organization is that they facilitate evaluation of performance. Because if we set goals, we can clearly evaluate the performance of our workers or employees, or even the company as a whole, in line with or in contrast with the goals that we hoped to achieve. Facilitate evaluation of performance, that we can see what we need to do better or change as an organization. Facilitate evaluation of performance. Another one is they facilitate optimal allocation of resources, because the resources that have been endowed in this organization, the endowed resources, the resources that we have we will be able to allocate them in line with the goals that we have set. Also, another one is facilitates planning that now even the plans that we formulate, either the corporate, the strategic, the operational, and the tactical plans, they will be in line with these goals that we have set. And then another one is they facilitate decentralization and delegation. Decentralization and delegation. What we mean by this is decentralization is the instance where authority is not centered at a certain specific point or level of management in the organization. So decentralization is whereby the subordinates also take part in decision making or are involved also in coming up with these goals that you're saying. And delegation is giving up responsibility to your subordinates. So it facilitates these functions in that if we come up with goals, they will necessitate us to employ decentralization and delegation. And then another one, it provides motivation. It provides motivation that if we come up with goals, the employees will feel motivated and will work in line with the goals to try and achieve them. So those are some of the importances of goals and objectives. And then the other part I want us to look at is management by objectives. Management by objectives, or MBO, management by objectives. So this one, it involves collaboratively coming up with goals from the top level manager to the subordinate managers. So it is collaboratively coming up, collaboratively coming up with goals and objectives by management and subordinates, by the management and subordinates. So this one is involving the subordinates in coming up with the goals or objectives we set out as a company or an organization. So what are some of the advantages, or before that we look at the features of this management by objectives. So some of these features include, there's that superior and subordinate participation, and subordinate participation. Superior and subordinate participation. And also joint goal settings. By joint goal settings, it involves now the superior taking into account their goals and the subordinates themselves. So joint goal settings that we involve the superior and the subordinate in coming up with goals or objectives. And then another one is joint decision on methodology. What we mean by this is they come up with the best decision on the method to attain these goals, methodology. And then another one is there's support from superiors, that if we come up with a goal as subordinates, the superiors will ideally support the subordinates if it is in line with the overall organizational goals and objectives. And then another one, there is support. The subordinates have freedom to be creative. Subordinates have freedom to be creative. freedom to be creative. What we mean by this is that, for instance, if we involve the subordinates, they have the freedom to come up with the goals that they see will help achieve the organization mission and vision. And then, so some of the advantages of management by objectives, So we have different advantages of incorporating the subordinates' views with the top level management in coming up with objectives. One is that it minimizes resistance to change. What we mean by this is that the subordinates now will feel a part of the people who came up with the goals, minimizes resistance to change. So in involving them, they will be less likely to resist to the goals or objectives we come up with, minimizes resistance to change. Another advantage is that it motivates the staff due to participation, because now they will feel part of a team in that they are involved in coming up with these objectives. And then another one, there's increased employee commitment. Motivates employees, and there's employee commitment. So what we mean by this is that if you formulate an objective in line with including the superiors and subordinates, the employees will be likely to be committed towards its achievement. So those are some of the advantages of management by objectives, that in involving the subordinates in coming up with objectives, there are some advantages that the organization will have in terms of coming up with motivational plans or minimizing resistance to change. And then it enhances self-discipline, also another one, enhances self-discipline, in that if you come up with a goal by yourself or they involve the subordinates, the employees will be likely to be more disciplined towards achievement of those goals. And then it facilitates participative management, also facilitates participative management. Participative management is whereby the top level managers engage the subordinates in decision making or formulation of goals and objectives. And then we also have certain limitations that we have with management by objectives. So what are some of the disadvantages or limitations of management by objectives? One, it is time consuming. What we mean by this is this consultative process of involving the subordinates alongside the management will make us use a lot of time in formulating these objectives or goals. And then the environment is changes too frequently. Environment is too dynamic. Environment changes frequently. For this management by objectives to work, for MBO to work. And then it also involves a lot of paperwork, and it emphasizes on quantitative goals, rather than qualitative goals. So these are some of the limitations of using management by objectives as a as a management style. And then quantitative rather than qualitative goals. And then it may lack the top management support in case they don't wish to relinquish control, that there's some top level managers who may fail to want to consult with their subordinates. So it may lack top level, may lack top management support. Top management support who may wish to maintain control. So these are some of the limitations of using management by objectives, maintain control. So another aspect of planning that I want us to look at is decision making. And decision making involves making a choice among alternatives. So decision making, it involves making a choice among alternative decision making. So it's the process of making a choice between alternatives. And we have certain environments where a decision can be made, making a choice between alternatives. So the different environments that a decision can be made is categorized into one, environment of certainty. This is where we know the outcome of the decision that we will make, environment of certainty. As the word suggests, we know the outcome of the decision that we will make. So outcome is known for environment of certainty. And then we have environment of risk. Environment of risk. So this one is where the outcome of action is not known, but the probability of each possible outcome can be estimated. Outcome is not known, but probability can be estimated. Probability of each outcome can be estimated. So these are the different types of environments that a decision can be made, and lastly, can be estimated. And lastly is the environment of uncertainty. This is where the outcome is not known and there is no probability of each outcome being estimated or being known. So outcome is not known also. Outcome is not known. And there's no way of estimating this probability of any of the outcome. And probability of each outcome is not known either. So these are the different environments that we can formulate a decision from. And we have certain decisions that we can come up with, and they are classified according to, so classifications of the different decisions that we come up with, classification of decisions. One, we have strategic decisions. So these ones, they are made at the top level. And they affect the business as a whole. Top level makes them, and they affect the business as a whole, So this affects every aspect of the business. And then we have operational decisions, operational decisions. These ones, they are short routine decisions, in which they affect things to do with output decisions. So they may generally affect a certain aspect of the business, output decisions. Also to do with inventory levels. So these are routine decisions that are done on a regular. So in line with this, so the differences between this strategic decision, one is that this one is formulated at the top level, while this one for operational, it may be formulated by tactical managers or tactical managers. Also, for strategic decisions, it covers the entire organization, while for operational, it covers a specific activity like output decisions or inventory decisions. And then these ones, they are non-routine decisions. They are not done on a regular as compared to these operational, which are done on at various interval or short routine decisions. And then for strategic, they focus on effectiveness rather than efficiency, while for operational decisions, they focus on efficiency rather than effectiveness, focus on efficiency. So these are the characteristics or the things that differentiate the strategic and operational decisions. And then these ones, they are also complex in nature. They are complex, and these ones are relatively simpler as compared to strategic decisions. Relatively simpler as compared to strategic decisions. So we have different other classifications of decisions that are further to these two types of decisions that we're going to look at, and they entail structured and unstructured decisions. So for structured decisions, these ones, these decisions, they are arrived at by following an established framework of policies. This one, established framework of policies. You follow this framework of policies to arrive at a decision. And then for unstructured decisions, these ones are made when a need arises, or they are made on unusual, unique situations that have no existing policies that have been laid out before, So for structured decisions, they use an established framework of policies. For unstructured decisions, they are made in line with the unique situation that has occurred. And then another aspect I want us to look at is group decision making. So for group decision making, this involves coming up with a decision in line with a group of individuals. So it is a consensus where decision making is made by decision making is arrived at by engaging different individuals. Consensus where decision making is arrived at by engaging different group of individuals. Group of individuals. So we have certain advantages that accrue from using this group decision-making technique. Advantages of this group decision-making technique. One is that there is a pool of knowledge and expertise, pooling of knowledge and expertise, What we mean by this is that the group of individuals that we have collected or that are involved in coming up with a decision bear different experiences and knowledge in terms of skills. So that congregation of different people will ensure that the decision we come up with is effective and in line with the organizational goals. Also, they facilitate critical analysis and evaluation of decisions. So there is critical analysis and evaluation of decisions. So what we mean by this is that by bringing this group of people together, they can critically analyze the impacts of these decisions that they will make and deliberate on the effectiveness of the decision that has been arrived at. Also, it facilitates participative management. What we mean by this is that the top level managers engage the subordinates in line with the organizational goals and objectives. Facilitate participative management. Also, they increase commitment and acceptance of the decision. So there is increased commitment and acceptance of the decision. So from this group of individuals who are involved in the decision making, they come up with a decision that will in line be according to what the individuals of the group wanted. So there will be that aspect of commitment towards the decision being implemented, increased commitment and acceptance of the decision, that there will not be resistance of the decision that has been arrived at, since there was participative management of the decision. And also it enhances communication between organizational members, That in bringing this group of people together, they can clearly communicate on the various decisions that they want to be arrived at. So those are some of the advantages of using group decision making as a technique in coming up with a decision that is effective in line with the organizational objectives. So some of the limitations of using this group, decision making may include: one, it takes a lot of time, so it is time consuming, because now you have to consult, time consuming. And then there is that loss of confidentiality in the decision that has been arrived at, in that now the people who are involved in that group will know of the decision that has been arrived at, confidentiality. Also, disagreements, there may be conflicts among the group that is to come up with the decision. Also, committees are expensive to set up and maintain. That the committee chairing this group, or this group in itself, is expensive to formulate and maintain, set up and maintain. And then the members may neglect their regular duties in pretext of group meetings. So also, the individuals in this group may influence the decisions arrived at in adoption of decisions that favor them. So individuals with vested interest, individuals with vested interest, may influence adoption of decisions, that serve their interests, So some of the barriers to effective decision making, some of the barriers that may influence decision making or affect the decisions that have been arrived at may include decision making, one, a lack of adequate information, in that the decision that has been arrived at is lacking in terms of the aspects of the different information required to make such a decision. And then risk and uncertainty, that the decision arrived at bears some certain risks or the outcome of the same. And then unsupportive environment, that the environment in which this decision is made in terms of the working environment and the organizational culture does not support the participative nature of decision making. And then another one is ineffective communication, that in coming up with this decision, the communication required to formulate a decision may be tampered with in line with this groupthink syndrome also. And then another one is there's that pooled decision making, that the decision arrived at will be in line with the group. So there's groupthink syndrome. So these are some of the barriers to decision making that we have in coming up with a decision. And some of the decision making styles that we use in formulating an effective decision may entail: one is the tell style. So for tell style, this one is dictatorial in nature, in that there is no consultation with the subordinate, no consultation. So you just tell them on the decision you have arrived at as a top level management, no consultation. Also, sell style. This is where you need to persuade them, sell style. So you come up with the decision, still there is no consultation, but you persuade them or you sell the idea to them, no consultation, but need for persuasion, so that they buy into the decision you have arrived at. And then consult style. So for consult style, this is where the manager seeks the views and opinions of others, but finally makes the decision alone. Seeks views of others. but finally makes the decision on his own. And then there is the joint style. That this is where decisions are made on a consensus basis. And then lastly, there's the group decision making. So this one is the one that you're saying that you involve a certain or a group of individuals in coming up with a decision. Group of individuals are involved. So for decision-making styles, these are the different styles that we have. And in coming up with the decision, you can either use the tell style, cell style, consult style, or joint style, or group decision-making. And with that, that is the planning function that we have as a form of managerial function.